Thank you for joining us for our next installment of our small group study. Today we're going to be talking about the Ten Commandments. So would one of you like to read Exodus chapter 20? Read the first paragraph if you would.
21 through 6. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments.
All right, so as we encounter the Ten Commandments, this is, one of those parts of Scripture that everybody knows whether they're Christian or not. The problem is that most of the time we don't know them as well as we think we do. And in the way that they're portrayed in popular culture is pretty far off of the way I think that they were intended. The first thing that we have to see going into this is that we modern people have given this list the name Ten Commandments. It's not, in the ancient times, it wasn't known as the Ten Commandments. It was known as the 10 Words. Yeah. And one of the things that is a problem is just the idea of calling it the Ten Commandments to begin with. What images does the word commandment kind of conjure up for you guys?
Resentment.
Okay, resentment.
Yeah, being ordered to do something that you probably aren't doing.
Yeah. Command is a bad enough word, but commandment is even worse, I think. And I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that God here is bringing Israel out into the wilderness of Sinai and bringing them to the mountain, and he's giving them these words as a way of having a relationship with him. And so, if you look at what Jesus says in the New Testament, he says, when he's asked, what's the greatest commandment? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. And what you see in the Ten Commandments is there's a pretty clear divide in these two areas. There's commandments that deal with our relationship to God and commandments that deal with our relationship to other people. Now, the first four commands or words that God gives here have to do with our relationship with him. And the first one is that we're to have no other gods before him. Now, Richard Dawkins, when he was making fun of the Ten Commandments, said that this is obviously a stupid place to start. Why do you think that God starts here with this one?
Primary, foremost, of utmost importance.
Okay.
It's funny that he thinks that's a funny place to start. It makes complete sense to me.
Right.
Well, he just brought them out of Egypt and judged all their gods. So I think it
Right.
It's interesting, but we've talked about also if you get the top of the hierarchy wrong, you can't help but have the entire hierarchy wrong.
Right. Yeah, it seems to make complete sense to me that where you would start with a moral order is this is the thing that has all value above anything else. And what else would you put there other than a God? That's definitionally what a God is. And if you don't put God first, then he's not your God. That seems so obvious to me.
Does Dawkins prescribe that he's at the top of the list?
Perhaps. But it's not strange for us to think that God should say that, the first order in loving him is to put him at the very top because, as you said, what's at the top of the hierarchy orders everything else. And there can't be anything higher than your God. And if something is higher than your God, then that thing isn't actually your God. The thing that you put above your God is your God.
Right.
The second one is, I think, actually a little bit stranger, which is don't make any graven images. Now, we usually are taught this command as almost a repeat of the first one. Don't put any gods above God. But that's really not what this command is about. It's about worshiping God through physical mediators. So what is that really all about, and why is God concerned with it?
Well, I think instantly of idol worshiping, and when you are worshiping an idol, it's not the thing that you worship. It's a mechanism supposedly to worshiping the thing, and there shouldn't be anything other than God himself that you would worship. Ultimately, access to God is direct. There's nothing in between us.
Yeah.
I think also maybe it's God is emphasizing that I'm completely distinct and separate from my creation, and anything you try to anything that might undermine that could be very problematic and lead to pantheism, for example, or something.
Right. Yeah, and I think that one of those things that we have to understand is that when we make something the mediator, it often becomes the thing itself.
Yeah.
And so, I've told you guys that I have this strange fascination with the show Hoarders, and one of the things that happens all the time is that a mom will have a terrible relationship with her grown-up children, and one of the things that will get in the way of her relationship with her grown-up children is all the childhood things that she insists on saving, right? So she wants to save all their papers, she wants to save, all their toys, she wants to save all this stuff. Now, why would that become a problem?
Because she, in the end, is choosing that stuff over the relationship with the child it's supposed to represent.
Right. And you think, well, why would somebody do something like that? What would cause somebody to choose the childhood stuff over the child themselves?
Maybe it's something you can control.
Right. See, that becomes the big issue, is that the child I can't control. I can't keep them from leaving home. I can't, all those things are outside of my control. But the stuff I can control. And we have this desire as human beings to be in control of our environment, to be in control of our lives, to be in control of all the things. And if we're in control of our God, then that we're God, right? And the tendency is that we make mediators that we can control. And we do that because that takes all of the fear out of it. It takes all of the faith out of it, the trust out of it. And so really what the second commandment here is just don't make a mediated image that you're going to worship through, because then you will be able to control it, and then its value is lost, completely lost.
So you might say that the second commandment is kind of a protection for the first commandment.
Right. Yeah, and then we have not taking the Lord's name in vain, and normally, we've talked about, people see this as, using God's name,
As a curse word.
as a curse word or something like that. And it's not that that's not the case. Obviously, we shouldn't be doing that, but the larger implication here is wearing God's name to no effect. And why would that be a concern for God?
Oh, much like the second one, I think you diminish who God is and you then control it. It's ultimately you're the one who's in charge of the thing.
Yeah.
I think also if you say, I believe this, but then do something entirely different, that contradiction can't exist for very long. Either your actions will conform to your beliefs, or your beliefs will conform to your actions. And so that's a problem for you, but it's also a problem for the people around you. If I'm a Christian, and then you go do horrible things, it's not good for the people around you either.
Right. And then the fourth one is honoring the Sabbath and keeping it holy. Now, why is that important? Because that was in Richard Dawkins taking down the Ten Commandments. He was really there's the instance in the Bible of a guy cutting wood on the Sabbath and being put to death, and boy, that was just in his mind the most awful, terrible thing. And why might that be a really important aspect?
Well, I think obviously we have the 5-day work week now, and things are special in that regard, but that wasn't always the way. You'd spend 7 days a week trying to eke out an existence, and God is one saying, you're my people and I'm going to take care of you, But there's one day a week where you reorient your life around me. And take that out. And again, I kind of view it as a safeguard for the commands that came before it. And without that one day a week, and obviously it says that the Sabbath was created for man, but for man to kind of orient his life around God still.
There's also the 6 days of creation and the day of rest. I mean, it's symbolic or representative of God himself and his behavior there. There's a much larger spiritual, I think, framework on that applies here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that when you look at the Sabbath and the fact that it's a command, it's very strange because really what we're talking about is a day of celebrating God. And
Covenant evaluation stuff.
yeah, and it's very strange that God would say, hey, celebrate me or die. It does tend to diminish somewhat maybe the spontaneity of the celebration. But I think that there's something really important to this, and obviously we don't have the death penalty for that now, and I don't think that it would be a good idea, but there's a reason why that was the case, at least early on in the history of Israel, and that is that the thing that you end up serving what you worship. And so it's interesting that when Jesus was starting his ministry, one of the first things that happened to Jesus was that he gets taken by the devil and tempted in various ways, and he's basically told that if he bows down and worships Satan, that everything would be given to him. And Jesus' response to that is pretty interesting. He says that you're supposed to serve God alone. Now, Satan never said, serve me. He said, bow down and worship me. And Jesus automatically takes that to, we're to only serve God and him alone. That's it. Now, why would Jesus make that connection between the worshiping of Satan and the serving of Satan?
I think, we have a tendency to become like what we worship. And so if I become more like God or more like Satan, then I'm going to take on their characteristics, their attributes, their desires, and I'm more likely then carry out those same desires that, God on one hand or Satan on the other might have.
Yeah. And really what's happening with the commandment of the Sabbath, it's you need to celebrate this as the greatest good that exists. And that celebration, even though it's spontaneous, it's also commanded because there's a huge consequence if you don't do it. Really what God is saying is your relationship to me as God has to have physical form to it. What does it mean to have me as God? It means to celebrate me. And there's a day that we're going to do that as a community because that's what holds us together as a community.